Welcome to Tossing Grenades at Windmills. Windmills.
So I found out recently that I may be spending a prolonged period of time in Austin away from my podcasting equipment. And while I realize that the quality of this particular podcast isn't as good as it could be, believe me, if I'm doing it by phone or by laptop mic, you'd hear the difference. All four of you, apparently. I have two new regulars, so welcome. Anyway, so as much as I'm enjoying this little intro section, I may have to pause it when I do a marathon 6-week burst in the next couple of weeks. But at least for this week, we're still good. No major news to report. My editing is not as fast as it would be, and editing on Forever West is affected by real life, etc. I will say that I'm planning on reviewing some more starting novels. So if you know somebody who's an emerging author, I would love to hear from you for my review blog, which is I have an opinion about everything, or it's .blogger.com. You can also click indirectly from the Tossing Grenades at Windmills blog. Anyway, in the interest of keeping this short, I will now start with the chapter. Precyber by T.C. Ricks and Ken Leitner, Chapter 37. Roger stared at a large and growing stack of files and wondered if he would ever have time for golfing on the weekend. Each file represented a discrepancy in the net chat for the FBI and that they were supposed to review. In the past, Roger would carry the files over to Clark's desk and forget about them. However, Roger had suspended Clark over an alleged gold farming incident. Ever since that day 2 weeks ago, Roger had worked 12-hour days and much of the weekend struggling to keep up. Unlike many government employees, Roger did not like falling behind. In fact, he worried incessantly over it. Roger knew something that none of his minions did. The top brass at the FBI faced an increasingly tight budget and very much wanted to close the Atlanta FBI office. The only thing that kept Roger from having to move or lose his job was his keen attention to what he did. Atlanta scored the highest efficiencies of any regional office in the nation. Roger very much liked things the way they were, and he was willing to work a few weekends to make sure that they stayed that way. Because Roger had worked nearly non-stop since Clark's suspension, he was also blissfully unaware of the recent newspaper reports on Clark's supposed death. He knew about Catherine's murder only because a cleaning crew had spent half a day cleaning the blood out of his office. Certainly he was shocked by her death, but at the same time, he knew things would only get easier without her around. Roger knew her well enough to know that she played dangerous games. Still, he had dutifully followed up on her case. He checked with the Pinkerton contact who told him the case was already closed. The murderer was apparently killed the same day by elite Pinkertons. Roger never even asked for a name. Because of his near-complete ignorance, Roger's mood soared into the skies when his computer calendar popped to life to tell him to call Clark and remind him to come into work and that the suspension had ended. Roger had no idea that Clark would be anywhere other than sitting at home playing games, waiting for Roger to call him back in. When he called and found Clark's phone disconnected, he was stunned. Roger thought perhaps Clark had become reliant on his extracurricular income and had to make adjustments. If Clark would just come back to work, thought Roger, I could spot his phone for a couple of months. Roger decided to investigate. Maybe he could do Clark a favor. He decided to check with a local credit union. His agency had an open account with them, and they used it for official investigations. Clark surfed to their website, logged in, and typed in Clark's full name. Clark Yossarian. A brief report contained only one word, deceased. Roger's mood fell sharply. If Clark had died, then Roger was in trouble. He could not go on covering for him forever. He would need to hire a contractor. The top brass had cut off his ability to hire any new full-time staff. The contractor would cost 2 to 4 times as much. His efficiency rating would plummet, and they would close the office. Plus, he maybe, kind of liked Clark. Roger failed to connect his co-worker's death with Catherine's dead murderer. He decided to double back to check the death certificate. He logged into the main IRS database, which all federal agencies had started to use to track the citizenry. He typed in Clark Yossarian and got back nothing. According to the IRS, Clark did not exist. No, he had transcribed the A and the I in Clark's last name wrong. He looked back at the credit bureau report and noticed that their more sophisticated interface had automatically corrected for him. The antiquated IRS database had simply bailed on him. Roger retyped Clark's name, Clark Yossarian, and clicked the search button. The IRS report listed every income tax payment Clark had ever made, including one from 2 days ago. Clark might have been suspended, but the government was still paying him and still making auto deposits on the IRS to the IRS on his behalf. That meant the government still thought Clark was alive. There was hope, but Roger tended to believe the slick, modern corporate databases before he believed the IRS. Wait, Roger remembered Clark had a girlfriend. Roger pulled up his employment information and looked for the in case of emergency number. Sure enough, he found Emily's phone number. He dialed. "Hello?" answered Emily. "Hi, my name is Roger. Clark works for me at the FBI. I was wondering if you could help me out." "Oh, yeah, Roger, sure. Clark talks about you every once in a while. What do you need?" "Well, Clark's phone is disconnected and I need to get a message to him." "Oh, yes, yeah." Emily was clearly uncomfortable. Roger waited for Emily to complete her thought. However, the pause lengthened to a great hungry maw of silence until he felt the need to fill it himself. Yes, so could you give me his new number?" Emily paused again before saying, no, Clark doesn't actually have a new phone. Roger replied, he's okay though, right? I mean, the thing is, the credit bureau thinks he's dead. Emily stammered, "Dead? Oh, right, yeah, he's dead." Before the FBI, Roger had worked for a regular city police detective task force. He knew Emily had lied about Clark being dead. He decided to ignore the lie. "Yeah, well, all the same, could you please tell Clark that his suspension is up, and I would very much for his ass back at work. If he should fail to show up tomorrow, then he may as well wish he were really dead." Emily stammered back, "Okay. I could tell him that if he were alive." Emily hung up. Roger was reasonably positive Emily would deliver the message, so he happily returned to his very large workload. A mere 2 hours later, he received an email from Clark. Clark looked up from his terminal at Emily. "You're kidding, right?" She shook her head. "Nope, he really meant it. I think he's drowning in paperwork." Clark laughed. "Yeah, that would be Roger, all right. Probably one of the last people in government that gave a crap anymore." Well, that was not true. There were a lot of people that cared. It was just that most people sucked at their jobs. Most of the rest of them were like him. They sort of cared. They were mainly in it just to get benefits from a job. And Clark was on the high end of caring. Of course, when he thought about it, that was not really him anymore. He kind of had to care. It was personal now, in more ways than one. He looked at Emily. Will this interfere with my ability to work with the revolution?" Emily laughed. "You tell me. We're all criminals. You're the one that would be involved with a legal entity." Clark sighed and nodded. "Yeah. Well, I think I want to be. I want to do both. I figure maybe trying to fix the system at both ends might make more of a difference. Plus, it means a more reliable source of income." "Then have at it, cowboy." Clark considered trying to say something romantic, but it didn't seem like the right time. Emily had been behaving a bit oddly towards him these days, so he decided to give her some space. For that matter, he almost wondered if he needed it himself. Roger smiled. This would be easy enough. Roger's city police training kicked in. He just needed Clark to come into the office and to talk to him. Then Roger would know if he were lying. He wrote back, "Just come into work tomorrow. I need you here, and you need my help proving your innocence." I know you're scared. You can pick up the files and work from home if you like. Just fill me in on the details while you're here. Give me a call so we can work out the details. A short while later, Roger heard from him. Hey, Roger, this is Clark. Roger was very glad to hear Clark's voice. Hey, Clark, you're alive. Glad to hear it. Yeah, that's a long story and a complicated one. But Emily tells me that I've got my old job back? Clark sounded quite annoyed over the phone. Roger couldn't blame him. Not exactly. I mean, yes, but officially I was putting you on leave, but I can't afford to do that right now. Plus, after you were declared dead, I thought you were pretty much a goner. Listen. He paused and shuffled a few papers to make sure he was looking for something. He didn't want Clark to think he was desperate or anything. I have a few files I want you to go through. Would you mind? Clark laughed as if he knew something Roger didn't, but he gave him still a friendly laugh. His reply was instant. Yeah, Roger, I'd be happy to. Despite my slackness sometimes, I do love my job. Roger almost whelped with delight. He forced himself to calm. Roger did not want Clark knowing how badly he needed him. Roger needed him. Besides, he was a damn government bureaucrat, for goodness sake. It was wholly inappropriate. He took a deep breath, smiled, and simply said, Well, glad to have you back aboard, Clark. Would you mind stopping at my office for a few hours? No problem. Thanks. At the meeting, Roger knew he could take all the time he wanted. Despite Clark thought no one was looking for him, Catherine's case was closed. On the other hand, Roger suspected he was going to have to start looking into the case himself. No one killed one of his people and got away with it, after all, no matter how little he liked her. And if Clark were innocent, as he suspected, then the murderer was still out there. But most importantly, Clark took a huge stack of work. He smiled and called to confirm his tea time at his favorite golf course. Clark knocked on Gabriel's door while holding a thick stack of case files under one of his arms. Come in, Gabriel said from the other side. Clark carefully reached to open the door, but lost his balance, spilling 2 or 3 of the files on the floor. Clark swore and said, Just a sec, Gabe, and went back down to pick up the files. Gabriel laughed once lightheartedly and shook his head. You need help there, Clark? No, I'm good, thanks. He dropped a bit of another file, but then grabbed it quickly. Once he had all the papers in hand, he stood up straight and moved into Gabriel's office. Clark shut the door with his foot and sat in the chair, putting the folders in his lap, and then he was careful to ensure that they were not too far up his lap since they were quite heavy. Gabriel leaned forward, since he could tell that Clark was taking this seriously. What's up, Clark? I've gotten a few files from my job at the FBI. Gabriel raised an eyebrow. Oh, really? Are you sure you want to be telling me about this? I've never been more sure in my life. Look, I'm a government employee, so I don't want to break the law, but we both know that the system, as it is fundamentally broken. This stack of cases represents things that the government started to investigate at one time or another and dropped. The look on Gabriel's face indicated he knew exactly what Clark was talking about. He did not say anything, but motioned for Clark to continue. I thought maybe we could run a few of these through the shadow net, entirely off the record, of course, just between the two of us, and see what we can come up with? Gabriel smiled. I think that this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship, Clark. This has been the Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast. I'm Thomas Ricks. Music by Melanie Ricks. Voices by Skip Huffman and Josie Bergen-Lawson. Copyright 2012.
Kenneth Leitner
and Red Anvil Amalgamated.
To fight the forces of evil!